Okay, guys, this is not always a fun lecture to do, especially when I'm not able to do it face to face with you. Many of you have always known that plagiarism is something you should avoid. Yet every semester, I see plagiarism and I have to correct plagiarism. And unfortunately, not every semester, but generally within a year, I have to fail one or two people for plagiarism in the course. And if you plagiarize in my course, depending on the level of plagiarism, I can either give you a 0 for the assignment or an F for the entire course that you cannot withdraw from. Plagiarism is serious. And if you intentionally plagiarize and I'm able to gather enough evidence that it was an intentional plagiarism and not just accidental, we'll talk about that in a second, then I will fail you for the course. It's very serious because there are real world consequences for plagiarism, including multi-million-dollar lawsuits. It's also just straight up unethical. So if you've watched my intro video, you know that I teach government, speech, and philosophy. And when you plagiarize, like part of me just like stomach turns and clenches and it's just like, ah, guys, get it together. So it's best to learn what is plagiarism at the beginning of the course. And if you've got this video in your course, that means you probably have the Indiana University plagiarism certification test as one of your first assignments. If you're having trouble passing the test, you need to reach out to me so we can schedule a time during office hours before the due date so that we can work on it together. Everyone who has taken the test with me during office hours has passed within 2 attempts. I've also heard horror stories from folks who are just like spinning wheels over and over again, where they've taken the test, 10, 15, 20 times and they just can't pass it. Y'all, if you take the test, say 5 times and you're not passing it, schedule a time with me. I don't want you to waste your time and get increasingly frustrated with every single attempt that you take if you're not learning something from it and you're not doing what you need to do in order to pass it. I can tell you this, scheduling an office hour with me is not a magic wand. There's nothing different about the office hours than the tutorials that are already built into the Indiana University system. I'm literally just walking you through the steps that those tutorials have, forcing you to go slowly and to question every step along the way. So this particular video is going to give you kind of an overview of the 2 types of plagiarism, as well as what steps you should be taking when you approach a question. So I highly recommend, do not just watch this video. This is true for every lecture within this course. Grab a piece of paper, grab a pencil or a pen. If you need to, you can just like open up a Google document or a Word document and take notes that way. But I still highly recommend that you write things down by hand, because it can improve your retention of information if you're handwriting rather than just digitally typing. But worst case scenario, I'd rather have you digitally typing on a Word document or a Pages document or a Google Doc than doing nothing at all. So write these down. There are 2 types of plagiarism. There's word-for-word plagiarism, and then there's paraphrase plagiarism. This test is going to be evaluating your knowledge of these 2, identifying them, and then, really kind of going line by line and figuring out who has plagiarized. So let's start with word-for-word plagiarism. There's a couple of things that you need for word-for-word plagiarism. This is at least 7 sentences in a row identical, meaning that you have to count. It's going to give you 2 columns, an original source and then a student version. You need to look at the original source and the student version and see if the student version has 7 words in a row. Not, oh yeah, they changed 1 word in the middle, 7 identical words. If there are 7 identical words in a row or more, they must be in quotation marks. No quotation marks? Then it's word-for-word plagiarism, automatically. It also must have, so let's say they did put it in quotation marks, it also must have what an in-sentence or end-of-sentence citation and a bibliographic reference. I'll say that again. It must have an in or end-of-sentence citation and a bibliographic reference. What does that mean? An in-sentence citation is different from an end-of-sentence citation, but you have to have one of those. An in-sentence citation might say, according to the New York Times on September 12, 2019, yada, 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 yada. Like if you were reading it, you would actually read the citation according to yada, yada, yada. An end of sentence citation is typically where they'll put parentheses, the author's last name, and the year, if it's APA. If it's MLA, it'll just be the author's last name in parentheses. You must have one of those. The sentence itself must be marked as being, this is cited material. You can have, and this is where it gets sometimes tricky, you can have a citation at the top. According to Abbott in 2020, yada, yada, yada. That sentence is fine. Next sentence, it might say, he continues. There might be an indication in the next sentence that we are continuing on with the prior citation. He continues, the authors further, that's okay. That counts as an in-sentence citation as well. But you must have either some sort of verbal, if we're saying it, in the sentence, or an end of sentence. The next thing that you need is a bibliographic reference. This is required at the end of the sentence itself. At the end of the paragraph or the paper, whatever it is. You have to have this pairing. If in the body of your speech or your paper, whatever it is, you have an end of sentence citation, it must match a full bibliographic reference at the end. Something more than just the author's last name and the year. It has to include the full citation, where you found it from, publication. If it's a website, which most of you are using websites, it has to use the full bibliographic citation. So you have to have both. You have to have either an in-sentence or end-of-sentence citation in your paragraph, and at the very end, it must have that bibliographic reference. So for word plagiarism, you have seven words in a row in a sentence. You must have quotation marks if it's seven words in a row. And you must have an in-sentence or end-of-sentence citation and a bibliographic reference. If you are missing one of those components, it's automatically word-for-word plagiarism. So let's go to paraphrase plagiarism. I see this kind of plagiarism all the time. Students have copied and pasted from a website or their textbook, but they've changed a couple words here and there. I'm not going to say that I catch every attempt of plagiarism, but when I do kind of get tipped off that there's plagiarism, I can usually put the two passages, the original passage and the student version, side by side, and I can see that they literally, sentence by sentence, copied and pasted and then just changed words. Paraphrase plagiarism borrows ideas. It could borrow entire sentences but then change the words so that it's not exactly 7 identical words in a row. If you are using ideas, you are using sentences and then modifying them, you still have to cite them. You must have an in-sentence or end-of-sentence citation and a bibliographic reference. You don't get quotation marks when it comes to paraphrasing passages. There's nothing wrong with paraphrasing passages. You just have to give original credit to the original source. So you still need to cite. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to do it properly if you're going to be borrowing. I know students try to fill up passages, they try to fill out their outlines as much as possible, so they'll copy and paste things over. You need to get really good at documenting your work. If you copy and paste from a website, immediately put the citation in so that you are not in hot water later on when our plagiarism citation checkers end up catching you copying and pasting. I need to see what part of your work is your original work and analysis and what part you just got from a website because you were trying to fill things out. So please always remember, paraphrase plagiarism is when there's not 7 words identically in a row. Could be the same sentence with a couple words changed. It's no longer word-for-word plagiarism. It is paraphrase plagiarism. And again, you still have to have the proper citation in or at the end of the sentence and then at the very, very bottom with the full bibliographic reference. So as you're approaching the test, what should you do? You open up the test and you get your first one. First, check for a bibliographic reference at the end. If there's a bibliographic reference, you have to have an in-sentence or end-of-sentence citation. at least one. There may be multiples. In a single passage, I've seen students do that. They'll go through and they'll be, oh yeah, there's a proper sentence citation here. I checked that sentence. That sentence was fine. It was word for word. It was in quotation marks. Good, we're done. No. Check every sentence. There may be, and this test tries to trick you, there may be a proper citation up here, but an improper one down here. So you need to check the full passage. Just know that if you have a bibliographic reference at the bottom and no citation anywhere in the passage, it's going to be plagiarism, and it's just a matter of figuring out, is it word for word or paraphrase. That also goes the other way. If you have an in sentence or an end of sentence citation up here and no bibliographic reference here, you know it's automatically going to be plagiarism. You just have to figure out again, is it word for word or is it paraphrase? Now, there's a very small possibility you have no plagiarism whatsoever in your particular passage. So you won't have a bibliographic reference at the bottom, and you won't have any sort of in-sentence or end-of-sentence citation up top. This is usually in the test about one question per test that will have neither of those because there is no plagiarism. Just make sure that if you're getting multiples of those in a test, you need to go back and check, because that's not likely to happen at all. So here are some of my tips. Go slowly and be thorough. Don't skip over things. A lot of you have this tendency to like quickly scan. Don't do that. Read carefully. Count for 7 words in a row, because that'll determine if it's word for word plagiarism. You automatically know it's plagiarism if there isn't a pairing. There always has to be a pairing in the paragraph itself at each sentence that is cited, as well as the bibliographic reference at the bottom. If you're missing one, it's going to be plagiarism. So go slowly, be thorough. Usually when I meet with students, because they haven't figured it out, they solve it within their first or second attempt because they're like, wow, you made me slow down. And that's the important part here. You must slow down. In order to pass the plagiarism certification test, you have to get 9 out of 10 right. If you get less than that, you won't pass, you won't be able to screenshot, and you won't be able to submit the assignment. So go slow, give yourself time. If you wait until the very last minute, your stress level is going to go up, your anxiety level is going to go up, and you're going to get more wrong because you're going to go faster and you're going to skip more. Go slow, look thoroughly, go sentence by sentence. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me and we will get you scheduled for an office hour visit. Thanks, y'all.